What's up, people? It's the Train 2010, and man, Battlefield looks awesome this year. I've come out of my hiatus to talk about Battlefield Portal and just all the content that Battlefield 2042 is coming to support us with this year. So I initially wanted to break down the reveal trailer for 2042. However, as I was looking through all the content that was being revealed, and I was like a couple days late to it, everything sort of got revealed that was really worth talking about. And with Battlefield 2042's Portal, there isn't really too much to break down in terms of the trailer itself or the gameplay reveals. And I think that a lot of channels have done a really good job at sort of explaining what Battlefield 2042's Portal is. But I want to dive deeper into some more questions that I haven't really seen anyone in particular really talk about. And that might just be because like there's no way that we can even think about answering these like right about now. But I think these are some good questions to sort of look through in anticipation for the next few months or for when the game launches and just have our minds on what this Portal experience could look like. I am really excited to talk about this, more excited than this year's Call of Duty Vanguard or whatever they're calling it, even though that's what my channel actually initially started on. So let's take a look at some of the questions that I had for Battlefield Portal a few days after the trailer has been out and I've looked through it so many times. First thing that I wanted to talk about was Breakthrough. There's no doubt that Breakthrough has become a really popular game mode, one of the most popular since its introduction into Battlefield, um, in Battlefield 1 as Grand Operations. And it's been a stay through until now, even through Battlefield 5. Um, it is confirmed that it is coming to the all-out um, warfare mode, the normal multiplayer of 2042. And I wanted to like think about whether or not Breakthrough is coming to the old maps because these old maps did not support the mode, and it's not as simple as being able to go into these maps that did support Rush and place the objectives in the same place that the Rush like MCOMs are at. Or at least I don't know exactly if that's the case. I mean, Battlefield 5 had Breakthrough and Rush within the game at the same time. But since Rush was a more limited game mode, it wasn't a permanent mode in that game. I don't know if that's exactly how it works, and it probably wouldn't be good for balancing. So Breakthrough would have to be rebalanced, I would assume, to be on these old maps if it was an option to be able to be turned on for them, which I hope they are. I would love to play Breakthrough on something like Caspian Border, and I think it would work really well on something like El Alamein, which from what I hear is one of the biggest maps in Battlefield history. And so I think it would work out well on some of these old maps, but it would have had to have been balanced out for these maps from the beginning, like on DICE's end. Then thinking a little bit further about game modes, it would be Conquest that's next on my agenda. And this is sort of like an overall like big picture um question about Conquest, since we do know that the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are both going to be supporting 64 players. And with 64 players, it's possible that we might see the normal Conquest formula being multiple flag points on the map and you have to capture them, being how Conquest works in those old consoles. It's not confirmed yet, we have no idea, but it could possibly be like that for like the old consoles. Which brings up a question of how Conquest is going to work on these old maps, because we have moved over to the sector-based Conquest for Battlefield 2042, where you have to capture multiple points in a part of the map to be able to capture that sort of map point, to be able to start draining tickets for the enemy team. And so we don't know how that's going to work between 64 players and 128 players, but even further than that, we don't know how it's going to work on these old maps. that initially did not support the new like game mode at all. Like I can think of Caspian Border, since I did play a bunch of Battlefield 3, not much of the 1942 or Bad Company 2. Um, there are points on Caspian Border that we know are like points of strategic objectives, but if we were to sort of sector them out, how would that all work? And so, of course, of course, Conquest is going to be coming to something like Caspian Border, but in what way? That is up to who knows. And beyond that, since we do know these old maps are going to be supporting 128 players, however balanced or unbalanced that may be, 128 players on something like Old Conquest might be a very difficult thing to utilize. Same thing with Breakthrough. We don't know how new Breakthrough is going to work, because seeing 128 players go to 2, maybe 3 spots on a map is going to be a very tough thing to balance around. But that's not really something for like Portal. That's sort of something like a question for the sort of all-out warfare base game. But I did want to mention it at the least. Moving on from game modes, the next thing I wanted to talk about was weapons and how they'll be utilized for the different armies. Back in the beginning of the trailer, we did see that it was like the Operator Espinosa holding what I thought might have been an ACWR, and it was switching between all of the different armies from the different theaters of war. And that is something that is also sort of like implied and also sort of stated by some of the other like content creators, that that is how it works, that we will be able to use all weapons from all eras of the war, like depending on the different like even depending on army, like you'll be able to use all weapons. But one thing I also wanted to bring up was how that would work for vehicles. Would we be able to enable something like all vehicles from all the different eras of war being pit against 2 teams? Like, could we on, say, the map, the desert map with the buildings, would we be able to pit 2042 versus 2042, but they have all access to all weapons, but they also have all access to the previous weapons? Like, could we call in spawn Humvees? Could we call in spawn Spitfires? And different things like that. Like, could we call in spawn Stukas while also being able to call in spawn the new jets and the old jets? And it's just a question that I haven't really seen anyone talk about, because those are also still like weapons of war, and we've only really seen it in like, oh, World War II versus 2042, but World War II has the Spitfires and 2042 has, you know, the future jets. Like, will we be able to use all of the vehicles in all of the factions? This is a big question, because we are moving away from all vehicles being used for all people. Battlefield 1 is one of the most popular Battlefield games right now, or just one of the most played. And if you know, in that game, you have like the German like box tank, and like the British like slug tank, and the Russian like armored truck. All of them can be used for whatever faction, no matter what, compared to the old Battlefield games and Battlefield 5, where vehicles are locked to a specific side. The Russians get to use the Russian vehicles, and the United States gets to use the United States vehicles, for instance. And since vehicles are locked like that in 2042, it is something to bring up. Like, will we just be locked out of German World War II vehicles if we're running the United States faction? That's something I did want to bring up, because I think there could be a lot of like interesting dynamics being used here for something like the old like World War II things, and like seeing people go on massive streaks even against the new stuff, like even if they don't have flares. But that might not be an option in 2042, even in Portal, if the vehicles are locked to different teams. I also wanted to start talking about the weapons themselves. as they're going to be a fundamental part of our Portal experience, there's still some things that we don't exactly know. For instance, we don't know how we are going to be able to unlock weapons in 2042. Playing in the all-out warfare modes, um, it is probably going to be as simple as we play through the game, we unlock new weapons for our soldiers, and we get to equip them and use them. And there is probably going to be weapon progression system like there has been in the previous Battlefield titles. We don't know how that's exactly going to work in Portal, because since Portal is such a make your own experience type of sandbox mode, all of the weapons may be unlocked from the start. I mean, like, how would you do something like Robot Man of one tank versus 20 EOD bots if your EOD bot gadget slot is like locked as soon as you try to play the game? Like, you can't even function in the game. And so it's possible that we may see something along the lines of the old gadgets, the old guns, not being locked to a progression system. Or it's possible that no gun, no gadget, nothing will be locked to a progression system in Portal. Honestly, that'd make me a little bit disappointed because since Portal is cross progression between All Out Warfare and Portal to an extent, I would love for us to be able to still progress and get things in Portal, like actually feel like I'm accomplishing something. And this is where I can see something being as simple as progression is turned off or on for something like gadget unlocks and everything um, through like server settings, considering that you would need to have certain gadgets and stuff for certain servers, but servers that are running more or less a sort of vanilla or just a slightly modded experience would have something like the progression on where you can use whatever you possess, whatever you own. Then there are weapon classes. We do know that for Battlefield 3, Bad Company 2, 1942, the 4-class system is coming back in its standard way. But with all of the new 2042 weapons being thrown into the mix, and shoot, even the weapons from the old titles that may not have had weapons, such as being able to use 1942 stuff in Bad Company 2's like supports, we don't know how they're going to be added to each class. So what I'm trying to get at is, like, say for instance, 2042, well, there you can use the weapon for anything. Like if there's a carbine in 2042, you can use it as a medic or you can use it as a recon. And so if it may be still called a carbine, and therefore it could end up in some place like where carbines are in 1940, or not 1942, but in Battlefield 3. Um, and that makes a bunch of sense. But in something like 1942, where there are no carbines, where would they end up in the class system? Like LMGs would probably go in the same place where the LMG type weapons would go for 1942, but there's just there's just classes of weapons that are in modern day titles that aren't in like 1942. And so where would these weapons end up? Weapon attachments is also something I wanted to go over briefly, as 2042 I'm sure will introduce weapon attachments that we just don't have in previous Battlefield titles, or just upgrade integrations of something that we've seen in like something like Battlefield 4. And I do have to ask the small question of, will we get to seeing any of those on old weapons? Like, will we get to see like a double like red dot to like ELO scope on something like the XM8, or even something like the Kar 98, is I think something that we should be able to ask. And the final question that I had on my mind as I've been watching through these the trailers so many times is that you do see the tornado on the one map in the trailer, and not exactly sure which map it is. If I was to guess, it would be the new shipment yard map that we're getting. I'm not exactly sure the name of it in 2042. But that does bring up the question is, will these old maps be getting any storm type events? I think it was mentioned that we are getting sort of like storms and stuff like weather events for the old maps, um that like maps that didn't support it. But will we be seeing things like the tornado make its appearance, um something like the sandstorm, El Alamein, and I did hear something along the lines of even an EMP storm making it into All Out Warfare. So that's something that could be rolling onto these new maps, or these old maps in the new system. Um, Along with like another, like, like it's a bit of Levolution. We know that Levolution's coming to the All Out Warfare maps, and we've seen the Levolution event in Caspian Border in the trailer, which also I did want to bring up the question: how early is that communication tower going to come down? I mean, it doesn't look like it's controlled anymore, um, but we'll have to see about that. Being that it was controlled in Battlefield 4, it was not a controlled event in um, Battlefield 3, if I recall correctly. It just happened towards the end of the map, and like I want to see when that communication tower is coming down. If it's something that's going to be strictly towards the end of the game, if it's going to be at random, um, and anything like that. Shoot, like would it even be controllable through the in-game like um, logic editor, or just a setting that says it will come down at a certain point in time? Who knows? That's just something that we'll have to see when the game comes out, but I did want to bring the question out now. But those are some of my questions as I was watching through the Portal reveals and listening to some of the Portal news. The game is not too far away now. The beta is even closer, and I think this is going to make for a very good Battlefield experience. It's going to make for a very good first-person shooter experience. Portal is looking absolutely great. Don't let these questions deter anything from that. I think this is going to be a really well done experience if the game launches in a good state. Like, this is sort of feeling like a little Big Planet, but for first person shooters. Like you can sort of do whatever. But yeah, that's my thoughts. Thank you for watching. Leave a like and maybe consider subscribing if any of this is interesting to you. I might be doing some more talks about 2042 down the line. And so yeah, I'll see you in the next one.